Vayetchanan el YHWH, Vayetzahi lemor. And I besought YHWH at that time, saying, welcome to this week's edition of our Daily Bread, where we discuss the weekly Torah portion. This week's Parashat is Parashat Vayetchanan, which is the second Parashat of the book of Devarim, also called Deuteronomy. And in this week's Parashat, we get a Vayetchanan means and I besought. And what we start this week's Parashat with is Moshe beseeching YHWH to let him go into the land. We have a lot of, when we get into these early parashot in the book of Devarim, we get a lot of retelling. It kind of goes through all the various things that they've been through, the spies going into the promised land, talk about fighting the giants, about expelling the people in the promised land. And in this week's parashat, we get quite a bit that I see that kind of ties into this concept of not going into idolatry, and it's about getting things right, and it's about it's almost like there's a consistent message between the things that we see and the things that we create and make, and the things that we're supposed to be actually focused on. And so my message this year for 2011-12 is called It's Not About Moshe. Now in this week's parashat, we start off with this concept of the servant and the master. So what I mean by this is that there's this quote that Mashiach teaches where he talks about the servant. It's good for the servant to be like the master, but not to try and be greater than the master. And it's important to understand this relationship of servant and master. And what I mean by it's not about Moshe is that we also get in this week's parasha, which we'll get to in just a little bit, the people of the children of Israel saying, hey, we don't want God to talk directly to us. We want him to talk to you, and you could be the go-between, and then you can talk to us, because they were afraid. But this concept of the servant and the master, when we get started with this week's parashat, is that it's important to understand that Moshe was acting as the servant of YHWH when he struck the rock, which is the reason why he's not allowed to go into the promised land. And he got a little bit carried away, in my opinion, being frustrated with the children of Israel. Now, they may be being wicked and complaining and doing what's wrong, but at the end of the day, he let what he thought get in front of his duties, which was that YHWH wanted him to do a specific thing for them in order to teach them. So it's easy to get frustrated. It's the same way we can be with our kids. It's the same way we can be with each other. It's easy if you have kids to get frustrated, but YHWH puts you in charge of those kids. He puts you in authority over them, but ultimately those are still his children. He breathed life into them, and though we have the authority over them, just like we have authority over our wives, we're also accountable that it isn't anything goes, and it's easy to forget what we're doing. It's easy to get angry and frustrated at a kid and forget that it's not your place to be frustrated at the child. You're put in charge of them to teach them. So when they are making mistakes over and over again, the same bad mistakes, it's your job to teach them and be focused on what you can do to help them learn, not just to get angry and then be directing that anger towards them. And that's the same thing we see with Moshe and the children of Israel, is that he got caught up in the moment of all their wickedness and rebellion. And he even says later when he's about to die, he says, you've been rebellious since the day I knew you. It's not like, hey, it's been great, you guys are awesome. It's been, wow, you guys have been, rebellious, and they've been a burden to him the whole time. But he is the servant of YHWH, so it's not for him to get too emotionally involved in what's going on, because he's doing a job for someone greater, his master. And so it's important to keep that focus And that's what this message is going to be about. It's not about Moshe. It's about how we focus, and it's about what we focus on in our personal lives, in our religious lives, in our communal lives with other people, both other Messianics, Jews, Christians, or even non-religious people. It's easy to lose sight and get angry and get off track and get off focus and forget what you're doing, what you're supposed to be doing, and how you're supposed to interact with others before you get all caught up in everything. So the next thing is interesting because in this week's Parashat, it talks about that they will say about Israel, how great is Israel that they have Elohim, God, so near to them, and such a great Torah. Now, it's interesting that, again, we start off with this concept, how great is Israel? Now, when Israel hears this, they might mistakenly hear the wrong thing. You see, they might get focused on the wrong thing, which is, how great are we? Right? I mean, how many times have I seen it from religious people? You see the pastor, how great am I? I'm the pastor, I'm the rabbi, I'm this, I'm that. You can see it in Judaism. You can see, there can be a sense of, hey, we're the chosen people. Hey, we're awesome, It's all about us. And they can easily, just like the people who told Mashiach, we're the sons or the seed of Abraham. And it's like, hold on a minute. Before you start patting yourself on the back and getting focused on you, it's just like this phrase, how great is Israel? Well, it isn't Israel that's great, really, because there's qualifiers there, that they have Elohim so near to them and have such a great Torah. So what happens when you take that Torah away from Israel? Are they still great? See, are they focused that we're great, or that we're great because of the Torah, because of YHWH's relationship with us? But if we break that relationship, if we violate that relationship, we aren't that great. You see, that greatness came after those other things. When you remove those things, then you're no longer great. And see, it's easy to lose sight of that. It's easy to lose sight when you're the servant, that your master told you to go do something, and that he's dealing with these other people who might be rebellious and wicked and doing all these things wrong, but that's his problem. You're his servant. So you need to serve and not get in the way of carrying out those things. And so it brings a lot of difficult verses to mind for me, which things about loving your enemy, and things about, even Israel over and over again gets in trouble. Look at when they, would keep the spoils of war when they weren't supposed to. There's times when they were commanded not to, because it wasn't about the spoils. And even as the Torah forbids you to take the gold off an idol, right? And to covet that gold, because that is a wicked thing. And the thing is that many times we can get so focused and so off track and not be in tune with God that we can be focusing on the wrong things. I see people who are Messianic, who are arguing, and they're getting into heated debates, and, oh, this person is a false prophet and all that. It's like, who are you to go around and start, pretending to be the angels, which, in the parable of the wheat and the tares are the reapers. His servants, it said, shall we take out the tares? And he said, no, because you won't know which ones are which, and you'll uproot some good with the bad. Right? Let the angels do it. Well, how many people are stepping in for the angels? Hey, this guy's got the Holy Spirit. Oh, but this guy's a false prophet. We got to reject him. I mean, everybody's trying to come in and decide who the wheat and the tares are. And it says that you're not going to know, and you're actually commanded by Mashiach as his servants not to do that. So you have to have some wisdom. You have to go into it and realize that you're getting focused on the wrong things. See, because we're all at different places. And that person who you may think is being the false prophet, which is such a silly thing, because there's a difference from a false prophet and somebody who's just wrong, or somebody who doesn't understand something, someone who's ignorant, someone who has a misunderstanding about the scriptures. That doesn't make you a false prophet. But that's how people throw that around. It's just like when they say somebody's Hitler, or this and that, like in politics. It's like, that's a heavy statement to say. And to just throw that statement around, It's ridiculous. It shows poor judgment on the part of the person who's saying that. So we've got to stop running around saying this guy's the false prophet, this guy's that. First of all, a false prophet is worthy to be put to death. So you're condemning somebody to death. You better be careful that you're not doing any death penalty sins yourself, which open up a lot of things. Bearing false witness, which you may be doing in that case, could get you put to death. Looking on a woman with lust could get you put to death. Being angry with your brother without cause, that's equal to murder. That's a death penalty sin. So unless you've had perfect judgment and never been misinformed or misjudged a situation, you probably should shut your mouth, to be honest. I mean, the reality is, we're to have judgment. We're to think about judgment for our own purposes, to wrestle with what's right and wrong. But when you start trying to carry out judgment upon others, when they're learning and you're learning, things you think right now, today, 2 years from now, you may look back and go, wow, I was totally wrong about that. I mean, a lot of Messianics came out of Christianity. Now they look back and go, oh, wow, that was totally wrong, right? So should we have put you to death and called you a false prophet when you were doing that? Because if we would have put you to death, you would have never had a chance to grow into the person now who's trying to honor God and His Torah. So the fact is it's a linear. It's about where we are in our growth and in our walk. And the person you're yelling at as false prophet today, tomorrow might be somebody who's turned to righteousness. And you might also, when Mashiach comes back, realize that you were wrong about a lot of things that you thought too. So again, the same measure will be measured back to you. I mean, we just don't need to have the zealous, angel reapers, pull out the tares, it's really just a way of self-glorifying, self-justifying yourself. This goes into this concept that it's not about us. We have other things to do and other things we're supposed to be focused on. Moshe at that time needed to be focused on carrying out the commandments of God, not worrying about how rebellious the people were and other people were. And I see that in the Messianic movement a lot right now. I see that people are focused on, it's always fun to point the finger at everybody else, how everybody else is wrong and their theories are bad and they're a false prophet, instead of focusing on yourself and saying, where am I wrong? Where am I the false prophet? Where am I? What's the beam in my eye before I worry about the speck in my brother's? So it's interesting when we see, again, it's about what you focus on. How great is Israel? To some people in Israel, they think, yeah, you see, we're great. And it's like, no, they didn't hear what was really being said. The Torah is great. Having God near to you is great. Those are the things that make greatness. Israel by themselves without those things, not so great. And as a matter of fact, it's continually shown over and over again in the Torah when they don't have those things, when they go into disobedience, they're not so hot. And the nations don't think they're hot, and God doesn't think they're hot, and they get cast away because their greatness is determined upon a few things. So it's interesting then when we go into this next concept that it's not about the people, right? Moshe needed to realize it wasn't about the people. Because he comes back and he says, right, that the people had made YHWH angry with him. But see, he missed it too. He was focusing on the wrong thing. He got in trouble for his own disobedience. But he, in a sense, is blaming the people just like Adam blamed Chava, right? When in reality, he needed to take responsibility for his own sins. I sinned. I didn't listen to your instruction. No matter why, doesn't matter. He didn't do it. He was the servant. So he disobeyed, and he can't blame his sin on somebody else. See, it doesn't matter, because even if you justify it with the people, maybe the people were being rebellious, right? Must we fetch water for you rebels? Right? They were being rebellious. He was righteous, but that wasn't what was supposed to be the focus at that point. Okay, the focus was bringing glory to YHWH through the miracle when he was supposed to speak to the rock and have the water come. You see, and he got distracted and got on the wrong focus. And a lot of people are on the wrong focus now. They're focused on prophecy and, who's the third rider of the apocalypse and what's going on in the Gaza Strip. I don't care what's going on in the Gaza Strip. You know what I care about? how I need to keep my word, how I need to read and study my Torah more, how I need to find the problems and the flaws that I have and learn the wisdom from the Torah and be living out the wisdom myself. Okay, those other things I don't care about right now. Okay, they're not more important. Because this goes to the whole concept of it's not about Moshe. You see, it wasn't about the people. For Moshe, it was about obeying God. He had a job to do. For the people, it was about obeying God. Right? And for Israel, it was about, they had a great Torah, and they were close to God. Right? It's this servant master. It's where's your focus? So Moshe, right, comes out there. Then it starts talking about images, right? Because it talks about, this Parashat talks about not having images or idols or anything like that. And this is a real problem. And that's the whole point. You know what an image is? An image is something that we get focused on that's the wrong thing. See, as I can have a Torah here. And I can focus on this Torah and forget that this Torah, right? Some people may not touch the Torah with their finger. They could say, well, this is too holy. Right? And don't get me wrong. Appreciation for God's Word is great. It's wonderful. But remember that it isn't the book and the binding. It's the words. And then more importantly is how the words change you. That's the most important thing. This book can get burnt, can fade away, can return back to the dust, just like our flesh can return to the dust from where we came. But what's important is how we learned and changed our spirit. How we use those words to change our spirit. And from that spirit, everything flows out. And our choices will flow out from there. So the problem with images and idolatry, which is one of the main sins of Israel all throughout the scriptures, is that it takes God and it puts something instead of God. It changes your focus from the unseen God, but now we want to see something. We want something physical. We want to change the focus, right, of our relationship with the unseen God who teaches us things to change us. See, even the unseen God, the focus isn't even on Him. He's unseen. I think that's on purpose. I think the reason He does that, and even it says it in the scriptures, that He didn't give you a likeness purposefully, because you would start worshiping the likeness. You see, even in the nature of that, He's telling us, in my opinion, to say, don't focus on an object of worship. I'm giving you wisdom. I'm teaching you the truth. It says His Torah is truth. Mashiach is called the truth. He's giving us the truth, and the truth is supposed to change us. Right? His Word is supposed to change us. That's the focus. But everybody gets all these different idols, these different focal points. They want to make things physical. They want to take the unseen. They want to focus on God. All the worship songs, hey, God's great, God's good, God's wonderful. He is all those things. But there's more to the scriptures. I see in a lot of worship that it's how it doesn't take into account the whole Word of God. Worship songs don't take into account the whole Word of God. It just talks about who God is. It doesn't take us into account. But the goal of God's Word is not to return empty. The seed is put into us, the soil, and the goal is that we become like Elohim. Not to sit back, wicked, and looking at God and saying, wow, He's so holy, He is amazing. And at the meantime, putting no focus on ourselves to saying, wait, I'm wicked. I need to keep the Sabbath, and when I do that, I'm being like God, and then I'm adding value to myself and to God, because I'm becoming one with God. I'm living His Word. He's living in me. That's the focus. I see in religion so much now that everybody's got their variety of images. It's the variety of focal points. Is it that we're evangelizing? Is it that we're of this certain sect? Is it that we know how to speak Hebrew? Is it that we have a talit? Is it that we have all these things? That we, all that stuff? Those are images. Those are outward earthly symbols of something spiritual. You see these tzitzis? You see? It isn't about, wow, check out these tzitzis. Hey, I got these tzitzis that are great, or what are yours made of, or what's the dye? Did you use the special dye? It isn't about that. The commandment is that they're a reminder for us to not go a-whoring in the way that Israel has consistently gone and become wicked. People wear their tzitzis like it's some, like again, right? How great is Israel? That's all they heard. Not the part that Elohim's so near to them and they have such a great Torah. What they hear is, how great is Israel? Hey, that's me. How great am I? Yeah. Look at my tzitzis. Look at me. I'm wearing them like I'm a honored person. When the reality is, these are reminders. And if you're reminded of how Israel continually, God's people continually, go whoring after wickedness, these are a reminder for you. Don't forget that. Don't go walking around saying, hey, yeah, I'm a part of a special group of people. You should look on them and be ashamed at all that Israel's done so far. Ashamed of what our fathers and our forefathers have done. That's why we need a reminder right here where we can see it. Because we continually return to wickedness. Okay? So it's all about what you're focusing on. Again, it's not about Moshe. There's almost Moshe is a model of the letter of the law, right? We go to the New Testament. He's a model of the Torah, but more in particularly, the literal Torah. You see? And what Mashiach came and taught is he came and taught that, you've heard it being said, you should not commit adultery, but I say, if you look on a woman with lust, you're guilty. Right? So he's essentially saying, it's not about Moshe. It's not about just physically not sleeping with another man's wife. Those words were given to you as the very basics so that you could eventually learn and study and learn that you shouldn't even be looking on a woman with lust. You should learn the spirit of the law. The spirit of that commandment would be to not lust after another man's wife. And to not be angry with your brother without cause isn't just about murdering somebody. There's more there. It's not just about the sentence, the letter of the law, right? It's not about Moshe. Moshe, like a parable, was meant to teach you a greater teaching. The parable of the wheat and the tares isn't about agriculture. It is, because that's a basic lesson you can learn, but the true meaning was one of a spiritual sense, and it was a greater meaning than the surface meaning. So it's great if you heard the parable, but the fact is that it wasn't about just saying the parable. There was a teaching there, and Mashiach would consistently teach those teachings and reveal to us those teachings, those meanings, the points. He would continually take us back to the unseen Elohim and away from those images that we've created, because even the Torah can be an image. It can be a literal physical thing. And people can start to worship it without seeing what's inside it, without seeing the spiritual meanings of these words. And if all you did was have that, then you create these physical images of God, and they can be like a form of idolatry if you failed to learn the lessons and the spiritual things. It said, Elohim is spiritual, and we must worship him spiritually, right? So these are great. These are physical. It's good to stop sleeping with another man's wife, right? That's the first start. But that isn't it. Don't get focused on that one thing, that physical, single earthly expression, because if that's all you think it is, then you turn the Word of God into an idol. You failed to go deeper and see what the Spirit is, and it's the same with us, right? We are physical. But God can measure the hearts of men. He can go beyond that and measure the spirit of a man. And if you want to cleanse yourself, like Mashiach said, cleanse the inside of the cup. Then the outside will be clean. But many people focus on the physical, the earthly, the outward. And they think it's all about those images, the things they can see. But the Torah teaches us that wickedness and righteousness, it starts from the unseen. And if YHWH is the unseen Elohim, who is the epitome of righteousness and truth, then that means righteousness, love, and truth is also unseen. And it means it's spiritual. We can see the parts that come out in our actions, but those flow out from our spirit. And so this book is about changing your spirit. This isn't about physically tying some knots and putting the tzitzit on and doing all these things. You got to get more out of it. And if you're not, you're just looking at an image. It's like the people who are saying, hey, Moshe, we don't want to talk to the unseen Elohim. We don't want to do that. We want Moshe, right? We want to talk to you. It's the same reason why they picked a king for themselves, because they wanted, like all the other nations, to have a physical person. And they weren't satisfied with the unseen Elohim. Their focus is on the wrong thing. Because people who have an earthly mind focus on earthly things. See, if it's about having a nice seat in the synagogue, if it's about speaking Hebrew and sounding like you're an authentic religious guy and having a nice big beard and having all this outward stuff, it's like, who cares? People ask me all the time. It's one of my, to me, it's one of the dumbest questions, but I also find it slightly annoying. It just doesn't make sense to always, people I've never met walk up to you instead of like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, do you study Torah, blah, blah, blah. The first thing they say, are you Jewish? I don't know. Who cares? Why do you want an outward classification for me? What if I'm just a stranger walking through town? What if Mashiach was just a stranger walking through town? But it's kind of like they asked him, they said, what school did you go to? We want to see your credentials before we start evaluating how right your words are. You know what? The truth is the truth. God's not a respecter of persons. The truth can come from someone who's wicked. The truth can come from a child. The truth is the truth no matter where it comes from. Right? The truth is an element in the universe that you can't squish out. And you don't diminish the truth because it comes from someone you don't like or you don't respect. That was the whole thing with Mashiach and the Pharisees. They didn't really respect him because he wasn't part of their little social club. And everybody still wants to make these religious groups and hierarchies with the leaders and the deacons and all this. They love the dog and pony show where we can all know where our pecking order is and we can all, pat each other on the back and give each other a high five. And it's all foolishness. At the end of the day, just like John, Yochanan, the immerser, John the Baptist, he can be out there wearing, with a scrungy beard, just eating, locusts and be telling the truth. And all the other people have their religious organizations and they're wearing their big robes and they're having their meetings and all of that. But you know what? The words that John said were the truth. And it didn't matter whether they come out asking him, well, who are you? We want to know your credentials. And it's like, what's it matter if I'm speaking the truth? Stop putting on your eyes looking for those images and the focus of things that are physical and things that you think are important and start thinking about the things that God sees as important, which is the truth. It shouldn't matter who says it. If someone rebukes you and they're right, then you should accept it. And it doesn't matter who they are. The number one thing, if I say something's wrong with something, you know what they start doing automatically? Start attacking. Well, you need to study the scriptures more. Well, how long have you been studying it? Well, I've been doing this. They want to pull out credentials. What school did you go to? I don't care. None. How about none? How about I take all the credentials away? How about I humble myself? How about I become the lowest? I'm not Jewish. I didn't go to any seminary school. I haven't been studying Torah my whole life. I can shave my beard and put on clothes that aren't honorable or respectful. You could make yourself any way you want, but it doesn't change the words that I say. And if what I was saying was correct, just like what Mashiach said, for what good deed do you stone me? See, the fact is, they wanted to come at him at all different angles, but what he said was correct. And they couldn't argue with it. They could lie about it. They could pretend that he meant something else. They could say he did something else. They can make up all kinds of lies, but at the end of the day, he was correct and they weren't. And because he was correct and they weren't, they wanted to start attacking him with personal attacks. And you see that all the time when you start going in anywhere, or you start saying something and everyone loves you. You're the nice guy. If you come in and say, wow, oh great, yeah, that was a great teaching. You're awesome. Are you a rabbi? I mean, you're probably a rabbi. Can I call you rabbi? Can I bend down to you? Well, I bet if I did that to some of the people who've been angry with me and said all kinds of lies about me, you know what? I bet they would have been like, hey, you're an awesome guy. No, you know your stuff too. Because, right, if you'll prop me up, then I'll prop you up. And it's a big game. It's a big respecter of persons game. But the minute you start saying, well, can you show me in the scriptures where it says that? Because nowhere in scriptures does it talk about that I know of. All of a sudden, hey, you're a false prophet. Hey, you're this. Hey, you're unlearned. Hey, you're all these different things, They start to pull out the swords and the pitchforks. So the point is it's not about Moshe. The question is do you want Moshe or do you want Elohim? You see, even the people, even in Judaism, they honor, right? Men shouldn't be throwing honor around too much. First of all, it's not healthy for us. If you throw too much honor to somebody, you actually put them in a predicament of sin where they could become prideful. I'm nobody. I'm nobody special. I don't have to be. I love the Torah. I study the Torah. I'm not a respecter or disrespecter of other people. I listen to what they have to say, and I try and judge it according to the Torah. Now, the thing is that because even in Judaism they have all of these religious, they got the rabbis and they got all this, and they want to talk about the honor and all that, and these are what these titles are for. And the thing is, even Moshe, I think he was a righteous man. I think he was incredible in all these things. But it's not about him. The only reason why I see the value in Moshe is because of the way he kept the Torah and he served God. That's his value. If you take that away, then the man Moshe, I don't know. I might not find anything interesting about him, minus all the things of God. So it's like, who are we giving the credit to? Do we give the credit to the man or to the greatness that he's doing due to the fact that he's doing the Torah? So it's the Torah that should be glorified, not the man. And that's the same thing. I honor the Torah. The Torah is honorable. God's servants, certainly. We appreciate it in all this. But at the same time, I know that it's not them in particular. And there can get a little danger, in lifting the person up instead of the fact that they're a servant of Elohim and lifting up Elohim's words that he's spoken through that servant. That is what's of value. So we get the Shema. We get the 10 Commandments in this week's Parashat. These are the great things. Did you find them? Did you find in this whole Torah portion that the greatest thing were those 10 Commandments? Are you focusing on the right thing? You see, nestled around all of these things in this Torah are God's 10 Commandments, which are so important and so powerful. And we need to focus on those. And what do they mean? And what's the spirit of those commandments? So we get the Shema, right? And the Shema talks about the Echad. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about Mashiach. When he talked about the servant, it would be good for them to be as their master, but not to seek to be greater than. And that greater than could also be included in separate than. You see, because the opposite of being Echad, one, would be separate. So, and if you look at this master, you're aligning this way, right? Whether you're separate or one with him, and then you also know that you aren't going to surpass him, that you can get, equal to him, one with him. And if you're one with your master, right? If this is the master, and here am I, the servant, oh, I'm trying, okay. What happens when you become one with him? Do you see what happens? You don't see, you don't see the servant anymore. Who do you see? You see the master, right? What do you think Mashiach says? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Because when a servant is so much like his master, and everything he does is exactly like his master would do, then you don't see the servant anymore. You just see the master. And this is this concept of this Shema, this Echad, is when we're not trying to be better than, we're not trying to create an image. Even like the invisible Elohim, we should be the same way. We shouldn't be important, but we should speak and do truth. We should live truth. Right? That's what we should be doing. And that just gives you a whole different mindset on God and on the Torah. It's just the same way. I'll leave you with a little riddle. I've got a couple more points here. Do you think God would rather have you worship Him or keep all of His commandments? If God had the choice. Well, I can tell you in the Torah, He's already talked about it. See? The blood of bulls and goats, right? All the animals there are to sacrifice. He doesn't need those. What He wants is for you, just like He said He hates His holy days with lawlessness. You see? What He wants, I believe, is for you to keep His commandments. That's it. It isn't about Moshe. It isn't about those other things, those things that are the intermediaries between us and God. It's about being like God. And a lot of times religion, they make this in-between package. Whether it's Moshe or the Messianics or the Christians, or is it about salvation? Is it about this? They make it about 100 things other than being like God. Humbly being like God. See? Because that doesn't give you anything to focus on, except for yourself, right? That doesn't give you something external that you can put out here and go, well, I'm a member of this church. Well, I'm wearing this type of outfit. Oh, we're the promised children. We're the lost children of Israel. Oh, we're a Jew. Doesn't matter, whatever you want to call it. You want something out there that you can say, hey, that's it. That's what's important about the Word of God. You want the tangible. You want to touch it like an idol. You want to carry it around. You want to make it look the way you want it. And that becomes God to you. And you can lose sight of the invisible Elohim. You can lose sight of learning what love really is. And studying His Torah. So in this Parashat, we get the reminders. We talk about the tzitzis, the mezuzah, all these different things. See, those aren't the key. People love those. See, the easiest thing to do is go out and buy a talit and a mezuzah and blah, blah, blah. Someone comes in and they're like, hey, I got to get all this Jewish-looking stuff. And see, look at how I'm part of this. And you could come in with none of that. When I came in, I thought, okay, it's time to read the Word of God and do whatever it says. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So I opened up page 1 in Genesis, and I started reading the whole thing. That didn't cause me to run out and buy a talit, or start speaking Yiddish, or doing any of these other things. It started showing me all the things I was doing wrong. And I got rid of things. And I stopped eating pork. And I started doing the things that I thought were right, that the Torah wanted me to do. These are the things that you go after. But it's easy to chase the trinkets and the outward stuff, so you could feel like you really are something. And it's like, don't glory in yourself. Don't glory in things. Don't glory. It's not about Moshe. Don't glory in an image. You see, we get to the last part, and it talks about casting out those who were before you, right? Who are in the promised land currently. And what it says is you're supposed to destroy their idolatry. You don't go in and just cast them out and say, hey, but they've got some pretty cool things here we're going to do. It means the people who were there before you did wrong in the eyes of God. Don't do what they did. Yet how many people come in here and say, well, Judaism in the time of Mashiach, did X, Y, Z. I don't care. Judaism in the time of Mashiach got the temple taken away from them for wickedness. Judaism in the time of Mashiach got corrected by Mashiach continually for what they were doing wrong in their poor interpretations and some of their traditions. So don't sell me on historical Judaism that that's how, hey, they did it, so that's a stamp of approval, or that's what I should be doing. Why would I want to go in and take over the sins or things that may not be correct with the Torah? That doesn't concern me. What I'm concerned about is studying the Torah. People talk about, oh, well, this is that, and this is how, the rabbis have taught this, and it's like, I don't care. I'll listen to it, but the value there, just like the value in Israel, isn't in Israel itself. It's in, right? And what a great Torah they have, it says in this Parashat. God's so near to them, and what a great Torah they have. So, to me, I love the Jewish people because they have something to do with God and the Torah. But aside from that, culturally, I don't really care. If they want to create an extra holy day and do something else, hey, that's on them. I'm not running out to try and emulate anything that they're doing culturally, because that's not the relationship I have with them. The love I would have for them is because of their love for the Torah. What's great about Israel is their Torah, and that God is close to them. That's what's great. So if a person asks me, well, what's great about the Jews? I would say, well, the homosexual Jews, I have no interest in talking to them, because that's a violation of the Torah. Now you've removed the Torah from the person, and Israel, when they're disobeying God's Torah, is not great. They're not a great nation. Okay? They're great when they're keeping the Torah. So if you want to pray for the peace of Israel and Jerusalem, there's only one peace. The peace that man has with God when they're obeying his commandments. And there's one war, and that is the war when you disobey God's commandments. Then you are the enemy. That's how it is. Just like the parable of the wheat and the tares. There's the children of God and the children of the devil. Okay? And as Mashiach said, you're like, when they said, we're the seed of Abraham, he said, you're your father the devil, who's the father of lies. Because they love to lie. So you just don't get to have both worlds. You don't get to be a liar and then say, yeah, we're the children of God. Sorry, God is the truth. His children are also truth. That's why we work on ourselves to extract out the lies that we believe. Not worrying about what we think everyone else, all their lies. Don't worry about someone else's field. Work in your own field. See, the thing is that the Haftorah finishes up and it says, don't make things God, right? He's talking about all over. Can you compare me to this and to that and all that? These are his creations. You can't compare God to a little part of his creation. That isn't God. You don't make that God, because in doing so you lessen God. You shrink him down. This Torah is only a fraction, right? Just like he said, if you're angry with your brother without cause, you're guilty of murder. So the actual commandment, you shall not murder, the physical, don't go and take someone else's life unlawfully, is only a fraction of the much larger commandment, which is not to be angry with your brother without cause. Well, what's cause? Cause is the whole Torah. So in any way that you violate that Torah towards your brother unjustly is as murder. It's the spirit of murder. We are to love one another. And so that would cause a person to be really humble and study a lot of the Torah. Because the more they study the Torah, the more they'll know what is with cause anger and what is without cause anger. That's a big thing. That was a big statement that Mashiach said. So we don't make things God. We live God. That's my message for this year. It's not about Moshe. It's about God. He's just a servant. Till next time, I'm going to say Shalom.